Picture this. Northern California. Crisp morning air. You feel the shift in the wind. A town named Paradise, California. A simple transmission tower holding a power line. A piece of metal that had been worn thin. Then the arc. Then fire. Then the collapse. Entire neighborhoods turned into ash. Lives lost. Futures blown away. That disaster wasn't a freak accident. It was a symptom of something far deeper. The kind of story that forces a question. Why does a company like PG&E still exist? And maybe more importantly, why do we let it keep running the system that delivers our power while it repeatedly fails the most basic test of public service? Welcome to the SolarPunkPro podcast. I'm James Vanzer, and today we dive into PG&E, the poster child of why the traditional utility model doesn't just falter, it actively becomes a risk to the communities it claims to serve. We're going to walk the path from contaminated groundwater to wildfire catastrophe to political bailouts. And we're going to ask the question, what happens when a monopoly becomes too big to fail, yet too dangerous to trust, and what does it tell us about the system that keeps propping it up? So lean in, because this story, it isn't just about one company, it's about the cracks in the system and where the future of energy should go, instead of sitting back waiting for them to fix it. It starts innocently. A utility is born to serve. PG&E, founded in the very early years of the 20th century, becomes the dominant power and gas utility in much of Northern and Central California. The promise? Reliable service, safe infrastructure, what economists call a public good. The reality? It's a license to earn guaranteed returns, write-off risk, and centralized control. And here's the twist. This model, it did. It made sense in a world of big coal plants, central generation, long transmission lines. But the world has changed. Renewable energy, rooftop solar, storage, microgrids, they have all challenged the assumptions of the old model. Yet PG&E, it remains insulated. Its revenues are locked in, its regulatory framework deeply entrenched. It wasn't built for a decentralized, agile grid. It was built for control, and with control comes complacency. With monopoly comes opportunity for negligence. Flash forward to the 1990s. It's a small town of Hinkley, California, a case that has become legend thanks to the movie about Erin Brockovich. Chromium-6 in the groundwater. PG&E's disposal practices. Communities exposed, families harmed. The company eventually settled for about $333 million. But what that settlement doesn't show is the pattern. Conceal, deny, delay. Resume business as usual. The metaphor is rich, a utility that supplies the life-giving current that also pollutes the well. The duality shoots through PG&E's story. It's not just a power provider. It is a company operating in a system that rewards upkeep only when it becomes unavoidable. That means when maintenance is cheaper than replacement, the incentive is to defer. When trimming trees costs money now, but if fire later means abstract liabilities or state bailouts, why act? When paying a fine is cheaper than a full overhaul, why overhaul? Now let's shift to November 8th, 2018, the infamous campfire in Paradise. The cause? It was a worn hook on a transmission tower belonging to PG&E. It failed, sparked an arc, ignited brush. It ignited the community. 85 people died, over 18,000 structures destroyed, billions in damages. PG&E subsequently pleaded guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter. What's shocking? It's not just the scale of the disaster, it's the mechanism. A link in a transmission tower went unchecked for a century, 100 years. Perhaps because the company's maintenance priorities were skewed. Perhaps because the regulatory model allowed risk to accumulate. Here's the business logic. After a fire, reconstruction means new assets, new rate base, new profits for shareholders. Before a fire, prevention spending may not be allowed to be spent in the rates. The shareholders might have to pick up some of it. That means utilities literally earn more by rebuilding than by preventing. That perverse logic turns tragedy into profit without immediate danger to any of the executives, without meaningful accountability. Did they drink the water in Hinkley? And when you layer on top of that the legal doctrine of California called inverse condemnation, where utilities get held liable for any fire sparked by their equipment, regardless of fault, you get a weird cocktail. Utilities fade risk into the regulatory model. Then they get bailed out and reorganized when the liabilities pile up. So let's ask, if the model sends the signal, don't invest in prevention, what do we expect the company to do? The answer, exactly what it did. Step back to the 1990s. California decides to experiment with deregulation. PG&E sells off its generation assets, even though regulators told them to hold on to half of them. Because, guess what? They may need them. When the grid got tight and companies like Enron, remember Enron, and others artificially constrained supply, prices soared. PG&E had to file for bankruptcy in 2001. Here we see the same refrain. Company sells off the real risk, claims it can't afford the liabilities, but still holds the public service contract, still charges monopoly rates, still lobbies policymakers. The utility model shifts into a hybrid. Risk is socialized, profit is privatized. The reveal? PG&E, it isn't just recklessly negligent, it is structurally incentivized to be. The model rewards deferred maintenance, whereby profits proceed, liability accrues, regulators intervene, company reorganizes, customers pay, cycle resets. Fast forward, 2020, PG&E files for bankruptcy again, this time driven by wildfire liabilities. Thousands of lawsuits mount, victims demand accountability, the company emerges with a reorganization plan. Government-backed wildfire fund protections. A $13.5 billion settlement is negotiated. Meanwhile, in regulatory hearings, the California Public Utilities Commission imposes relatively modest fines, $45 million for the 2021 Dixie Fire, which consumed nearly 1 million acres, where the cause was a tree that fell on PG&E power lines due to, wait for it, deferred maintenance. Here's the internal logic. PG&E, they earn billions with a B, spend millions with an M. The fine becomes a line item on the ledger. Meanwhile, customers, you and me, absorb higher rates, power shutoffs, and systematic risk because the company is judged too big to fail. The state intervenes, the company remains protected, lobbying continues, executives maintain outsized compensation. In short, the old model stands, shareholder profits remain, public risk is borne by you. The pipeline stays intact. What allows this to persist? Regulation, a model created when centralized vertical utilities served widely dispersed populations. Regulators gave rate base plus return incentives. You build, we allow cost plus profit. That maybe made sense in a pre-distributed energy. But what it didn't account for, when suppression of risk becomes unprofitable or invisible, maintenance gets deferred. When growth slows, incentives distort. And regulators, they are not neutral. The revolving door is real. Commissioners become consultants. Executives become lobbyists. Lawmakers accept political donations. Utility writes big checks. The state gives license. The public writes the bill. In this framework, PG&E is not an anomaly. It is the system working exactly as designed. A regulated monopoly with profits guaranteed. Risk socialized. Consequences very mild. The ask, why should customers still bear the cost of this model? Before we talk about distributed energy, I have to tell you about the monument PG&E built to its own hubris. The Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. And if you've ever driven California's Highway 1 along the Central Coast, you've passed it. It is a massive concrete fortress wedged between cliffs and the Pacific. It looks invincible. The real story, it is a comedy of engineering arrogance that became one of the most expensive public boondoggles in US history. So let's rewind to 1968. PG&E announces it is going to build the safest, the most advanced nuclear power plant in the world. Groundbreaking speeches, ribbon cuttings, and of course, ratepayer money on the line. Then, just a few years into construction, geologists discover something inconvenient, a major earthquake fault sitting 3 miles offshore. You'd think that would halt the project, right? Wrong. PG&E? Well, they just kept building. They spent another decade retrofitting the design, tearing out already installed piping, re-engineering the containment vessels, doubling costs again and again. The original price tag, $320 million. By the time the first reactor went online in 1985, the cost had ballooned to over $5.7 billion. That is roughly $15 billion in today's money, and every penny was baked into your electric rates. Here's the irony. PG&E, it sold Diablo Canyon to the public as a solution to rising fossil fuel prices and air pollution. Instead, it became a case study in regulatory capture. The California Public Utilities Commission approved cost overruns that let the company charge customers for its own mistakes and granted double-digit returns on the inflated rate base. Every delay and engineering snafu actually made PG&E more profit. And when public sentiment finally turned against nuclear power after 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, PG&E pivoted to a new talking point. We can't afford to shut it down. They already spent billions. Fast forward to 2016, PG&E announces it will retire Diablo Canyon by 2025 and replace its output with renewables. Applause from the environmental groups. Then in 2022, facing political pressure over grid reliability, PG&E does a 180 and asks for a 5-year extension plus $1.4 billion in federal bailout. Same script, different decade, overspend, underdeliver, and get paid again to fix the problem they created. And here's the reveal. Diablo Canyon was never just a nuclear plant. It's a mirror showing exactly how the utility model works. You turn risk into profit, mistakes into assets, and public fear into political leverage. PG&E's engineers may have built the reactors, but its lawyers and its lobbyists built the real machine. A profit guarantee disguised as public service. These are the reasons to keep it running forever, even as safety violations and corrosion reports stack up. And here's the punchline. Diablo Canyon sits between 2 earthquake faults in one of the most seismically active states in the nation. PG&E still calls it safe, but then again, this is the same company that called rusted hooks within spec. So when people say nuclear power can be safe and efficient, I do not disagree in principle, but not when it's run by a company that can't keep trees off its power lines. Technology isn't the enemy, incentives are. And here's where we shift from a critique to possibility, because if the model is broken, the future does not have to be another cycle of bailout, rebuild, and repeat. Enter distributed energy resources, microgrids, community choice aggregation, and local control. Cities in California have already adopted community choice aggregation, CCAs. These entities procure power for customers, invest in local renewables and storage, and then provide competition to the big utility model. Microgrids like the one at Blue Lake Rancheria stayed online during blackouts and show a path towards resilience. The solar plus storage plus community model already works. The only question, will we build it? And will we pull the plug on the old model? For listeners like you interested in clean energy, renewables, and meaningful work, there are jobs here. Project development, storage integration, policy design, community outreach. There are roles for installers, innovators, and thinkers. For you who believe power should empower people, not corporations and shareholders. So here's the reveal. PG&E, it doesn't just represent the problem. It is the business model for the problem. A company with repeated catastrophic failures still operating because the system rewards survival, not prevention. The fires, the contamination, the bankruptcy cycles, they are not random. They're predictable. They're predictable byproducts of a system that says profit first and then risk somewhere else. And that raises the final question. Why the hell do we still let it exist? Because we haven't yet shifted the political, financial, and regulatory framework. Because we still treat electricity delivery as a solved monopoly problem, not an innovation challenge. Because we still assume that companies like PG&E will self-correct, while the incentive structure stays the same. Here's your call to action. Think of every watt you consume as a vote. Every solar rooftop, every battery in your home, every microgrid your town invests in says, we do not accept the monopoly model anymore. Be part of the building, the system that serves the people, not the shareholders. If you're a clean energy professional, ask yourself, are you joining to prop up the old model? Or are you here to dismantle it? Because the future of energy is not just about decarbonization, it is about decentralization. It's about democracy. It's about doing work that matters. If utilities like PG&E keep their grip, we're going to stay locked into the same cycle. Disaster, bailout, repeat. and will miss the opportunity to build something resilient, distributed, and owned by the communities they serve. And that is it for today's episode. If you liked this deep dive into PG&E and the utility model, hit subscribe, leave a review, because the more people know how broken the system is, the more pressure we can build to fix it. Until then, I'm James Manzer. Thanks for listening. Stay charged, stay curious, and keep building work that matters.